early on, I realized that you could learn leadership lessons from anybody. Let me narrate to you an incident from one of the earliest branches that I headed. This branch had a very strong and active union, and the leaders were heavyweights in their own organization. But there was this young chap who wanted to take over. I watched with interest, and his band of 5 young followers went about capturing the mind space of the branch employees. The employees used to have difficulties in putting up their bills, which they needed to put up to reimburse themselves for various expenses like medical, travel, etc., as well as for applying for loans for which they were eligible, for instance, for home loans, etc. Now, this band of challengers, each one of them volunteered to become an expert in one area of preparation of bills or putting up of loan proposals. And then they went about offering their services to the branch employees. By the end of the year, every single branch staff was building his or her house with a home loan. The bills were getting paid in double quick time because they were submitted in apple pie order, and management didn't have to raise umpteen questions to pay them. When election time came around, this little band won hands down. The incumbents didn't even know what hit them. And that is when I realized that if you have a good team and a good strategy, you will win every single time. It doesn't really matter how small you are or how late you are with the idea. But if you have a good team, what then do you need to do in order to make them more efficient and more productive? The secret is never put a square peg in a round hole. It is the leader's job to determine what are the strengths of each of his or her team member, and thereafter position them in a place so that they can play to their strengths. The same young union leader that I talked about was considered a very difficult person because he never gave up a chance to needle management whenever he could. Now, I used to think that he does this because he was a highly intelligent person, and I thought that he was getting bored with repetitive jobs. Now, in those days of manual banking, the day-end reconciliation of accounts, called clean cash, was a very important activity. But it was an activity that needed not only diligence, but also expertise. Also in those days, union leaders never did any work for the bank itself. They were not expected to. But I decided that this chap should be challenged with this particular job. And I called him and I told him that if you really want to feel respected, you should be able to do this, so that you can tell not only your followers, but everybody else as well, that you can manage your union activities as well as a very difficult seat. My peer group of officials were quite disbelieving that this would work. I gave him the job, and believe me, not for one day did I regret it. And that is what happens when you put the right kind of people into the right sockets. You add to the productivity of your team. But what is a good team? How will you determine a team is good? A team is only good when, if the leader or a member steps away, the rest of the team can fill in that breach without missing a beat. I was a branch manager of a small semi-urban branch in Midnapur. That day, my husband had dropped me to the branch on his scooter, and I was just taking the cash out of the vault when somebody came running in and told me that my husband had met with an accident, appeared to be badly injured, and had been taken to a local medicine shop. I don't remember what I did for the next 3 or 4 hours. But as I was returning home with my husband, after having taken him to hospital, got his wounds stitched and dressed, that I remembered that I hadn't closed the cash safe or taken the keys with me, which I needed to have done. No mobile phones. My anxiety kept peaking as I tried to get to a landline in order to call the branch. When I did call them, my team told me, "Don't worry, We've taken care. We've done exactly what was required to be done under the circumstances. We have closed the safe. We have sealed the keys. We've called for a replacement from controlling office. That replacement has already arrived, has tallied the cash, and is now in charge. Please take care of your husband. We are here to hold the fort for you. I didn't know whether I was more proud or more relieved. But you know, for women, this kind of team play is required not only on the office front, but also on the home front. And this is because in India, women continue to remain the primary caregivers. And there will be times when you will need to prioritize family. I got posted to New York, and it was a time of rejoicing because obviously the experience would be huge and it was a big step up in my career. But what about my daughter? She was very young then and she needed special care. My aunt had just retired and she offered to come with me in order to look after her, and things were good. But a year and a half down the line, I got the shock of my life when the immigration attorney told me that we should not again apply for my aunt's extension of visa. She had already got 2 extensions, and he felt that if we applied a third time and the US attorneys refused, she would never be able to get a visa again. So his suggestion was, let her go back, come back after a year, and be with you again for the remaining 1.5 years of your tenure. But what about my daughter? Who'd take care of her? She had got so attached to my aunt as the primary caregiver because my aunt was spending the maximum amount of time with her. The doctors didn't feel that she would do well if I put her into a new situation with totally unknown people. And she did need that special care. What was I to do? My aunt was of the view that I should send my daughter back with her. So also my mother and sister, who promised to help. And my husband said that he would support me in my decision. But at the end of the day, it had to be my decision. Believe me, it's probably the most difficult decision I took in my life, to send her back with my aunt. And the next 365 days were the longest days that I have ever lived. Almost every day I would relive the last moments that I saw my daughter. When I got into the taxi and she put out her hands for me, and I turned my face because I didn't want to see her face crumple up. I would put through a call morning and night. Those days, there was no FaceTime, there was no Skype, there were only landlines. And then there was something called a false ring, when I would think that the phone was ringing, but the person at the other side was probably looking at a dead instrument. And I would get horrific images in my mind. I would think that probably my daughter had an accident or she's fallen sick, and all the people at home had rushed off to hospital, and that's why they were not taking my calls. My parents' neighbors got used to being woken up at all times of the day or night because I was in the US, and this was India, almost 10.5 hours, 12 hours difference. But the community came together, and if my parents' phone wasn't ringing, I could ring up anybody in the neighborhood and find out how my daughter was doing. I was on pins and needles at the end of that year, waiting for my aunt's visa to come through. And when it did come, the relief was undescribable. But then another apprehension set in as I came back to India to pick up my aunt and my daughter. And that apprehension was, what if she had forgotten me? And as I approached my house, my heart was thudding. I opened the grill gate, and there she was, sitting on the veranda playing. And she looked up at me, and for a moment all was still. And then she stretched out her arms again, just the way she had the day that I had left. I don't really know, even today, whether I did the right thing or the wrong thing. But this much I can tell you, that she's grown up to be a lovely woman. On my last birthday, just at 12 at night, I received a WhatsApp message from her. It said, "To my mom, happy birthday. Thank you for being there for me." I laughed a little. I also cried a little. And I tell you these things to illustrate that in a long career, there are decisions to be made. There are challenges to be taken. There are sacrifices to be made. And they have to be done by your family members, by your team members, and of course, by you yourself. You will never know whether it's the right thing or the wrong thing. But if your team play is good on both fronts, then the burden never becomes too heavy to carry. There is one other way in which you can lighten the load. Learn to laugh at yourself. Take yourself lightly. Be grounded. You know, if you step away, somebody else will take your place. And in all probability, they will probably do a better job than you. The word chairman itself has two words, chair and man. You know, the chair is the one that gets the automatic respect. The man has to earn it. I remember it was just about a year after I had taken over as chairman, and I was in London, when a friend sent an SMS saying that either Forbes or Fortune had come with this list of 100 most powerful women and that I should go through it. So I scrolled through the list, and lo and behold, I was on 36th position in that year. And who do you think was in the 35th position, just one step ahead of me? It was Her Royal Highness, Queen Elizabeth. And I was in London, you know, so I was highly tickled. So I sent off an SMS to my husband, have a look at the list, you know, this is where Her Royal Highness is and this is my ranking. And he immediately sent back an SMS. And he immediately sent back an SMS, and it said, she will be on that list till she dies, but you will be off it in 3 years as soon as you retire. That truly brought me down to earth. And if you are grounded, the added advantage is that you will be accessible. What happens when you're accessible? When you're accessible, you get to hear the things that you need to hear, not necessarily the things that you want to hear. And if you hear the things that you need to hear and you take them in the right spirit, then I can promise you that efficiency and productivity of your team will continue to be maintained. Just two other things before I wind up. One is, be a learner through your life. It's very important for us to keep learning. But who will you learn from? Learn from the people who are proud about the job they are doing. It doesn't matter whether it's a big job or a small job. Learn from these people because they are the ones who are trying to excel in every single thing that they do. I remember a lesson that I learned from a liftman. In those days, I was working on the 15th floor of an establishment, and I found that whenever I was stepping into the liftman would push both the 15th and the 16th floor buttons. So I asked him, why did he do that? And he said, ma'am, this lift recently has been skipping the 15th floor every once in a while. I know how busy you are. So in case it skips the 15th floor, you can get off at the 16th floor and walk one step down. It'll save your time. And I remembered having done that once or twice in the recent past. And then it struck me that this person had actually internalized the first lesson of risk management. That is, if you know that something will probably go wrong, have a practical backup plan. How many of us do that? We know that something might be going wrong. We know that we need the phone numbers of the ambulance and the fire brigade with us all the time. Do we have it? How many of you have it right now in this hall? Well, there are a few hands, and I'm glad, but most of us don't have it. So approach every situation with a questioning mind and a learner's humility, and you can't go wrong. I love this quote from Brian Herbert. It says, The capacity to learn is a gift. However, the ability to learn is a skill, and skill, as you know, can be learnt by all. And yet more, the willingness to learn is a choice. And it's a choice that we must all make, because it is only this that gives meaning to all the reversals and failures in your life. If you have learned from them, then you have done well. Last and not least, you must love what you do. Because in a long career, there will be days when you will feel challenged, there will be days when you'll feel energized, and there will be days when you'll feel exhilarated. But there will also be days when you feel despondent, when you feel dejected, when you feel disillusioned. At such times, you cannot keep up your energy and give your best if you are not really passionate about the job and if you don't really love it. It's truly said that it's a beautiful thing when a career and a passion come together. And if that has happened for you, your 40 years, believe me, will also go in the blink of an eye, just as mine has. Thank you.